Managing type 1 diabetes can be difficult and challenging. Today, a management revolution is underway that can help us all live happier and healthier lives. I'm Cliff Sherb, founder of Glucose Advisors. I will be sitting down with expert guests exploring topics in the advancements of the science of diabetes management, their personal type 1 diabetes stories, and details of the latest methods to help take control of T1D. We hope these stories inspire you to take control of your diabetes, health, and well-being, learning more about the advancements that exist to live a better life. For more episodes, visit our community at glucoseadvisors.com, learn from our team of advisors, and find out more about space available in our management programs. All right, welcome to the podcast. Howard and Chris, thanks for joining me today, guys.
So great to see you, Cliff. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I want to introduce our special guests here today. We have Howard Look, who's the president and CEO and founder of Tidepool, and Christopher Snyder, who's the community and clinic success manager at Tidepool. And for those who don't know, Tidepool is an open source, non-for-profit company focused on liberating data from diabetes devices, supporting researchers, and providing great free software to people with diabetes and their care teams. Their mission is to make diabetes data more accessible, actionable, and meaningful for people with diabetes and their care teams and researchers. So I am super thrilled to have you guys on. I have so many questions. Before I dip into that, I will say, break the ice a little bit. Do you guys have favorite movies? And if so, what are they?
I am smiling and laughing that you asked that question. So, believe it or not, that was an interview question for me when I interviewed at Pixar. And talk about a high pressure situation, like going to a movie studio and being asked, "What's your favorite movie?" And I was not ready for the question. So, I'm going to give you exactly the same answer that I gave them, which is all true. My favorite movie is Big with Tom Hanks. You know, this movie where he gets transformed after talking to Zoltar into an adult, even though he's a kid in an adult's body. And like that whole premise, I just thought was so amazing. And it was this incredible reminder of how we're all kids at heart and just enjoy. Like I remember this scene where in his adult body, he's jumping on the piano keys at FEO Schwartz, and with his friend who's a kid, they're doing all the things that friends do, blowing bubbles with bubble gum and stuff like that. And so, anyway, that was my answer when I interviewed at Pixar. I'm a movie fanatic, having worked at a movie studio, and I watch movies all the time, every weekend. So I love tons of movies, but I'm sticking with that answer.
That's awesome. I still love the Zoltar machine, and it creeps me out at the same time. I'm kind of like, ooh, that's really cool when the ticket comes right out of the mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, they're still out there too. I've seen them.
Yeah, I've definitely seen them too. Christopher, how about you?
Um, so with the Pixar guy on, I would say The Incredibles, because the scene where Dash learns he can run on water and he giggles gets me every time. The not nostalgic, but the thing I could put on the background anytime is Clue. That movie, just I will always watch that movie anytime I can watch
Great
it.
film.
But to go slightly more current, I go with Fast Five. The Fast and Furious franchise, as Howard can attest to, if anytime somebody mentions it in the Tidepool Slack, I think I have a notification set up. I will be there for that conversation. I love that franchise. It is so absurd. I just am all in. But Fast Five is where that series transitioned from just about the cars to doing bonkers stuff with the cars. And it was the perfect sort of mesh of a concept in the heist movie concept applied to the bonkers physics and reality of the Fast and Furious franchise. And it was right on the cusp of Dwayne Johnson becoming the most important person in media. So he wasn't quite like, his ego hadn't taken over that franchise yet. So we could talk about the Fast and Furious franchise for the entire podcast if you want to, but Fast Five is like, for me, the pinnacle of the absurdity and appreciation of what those movies have to offer.
I'm so glad that was your answer, Christopher, because if it wasn't, I was going to call you out and say, I can't believe you didn't say Fast and Furious. So.
I mean, I'm rewatching. I mean, to date this podcast, they just released a new trailer for Fast 9 or F9 or whatever they're calling it, and I have that on loop. I'm so excited for that movie. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to, if I want to go see it in the theater. That's a whole separate matter. There's still a global pandemic happening. but I've been fully vaccinated, so I'm fortunate to be on that side of things. But movie theaters, people, like, we've been spoiled by the part where we can just like pause the thing at home and go to the kitchen and make food. And
It's going to
yeah,
be nice to get back
it's
to
been a
seeing
wild year. Yeah.
movies, right? Nice to be getting back to movie
Mhm.
theaters. Yeah, speaking of lockdown, I mean, I feel like we've come out of this pandemic. I know, Howard, you and I connected during the lockdown, and but I feel like you have been in another lockdown, which is with the FDA for the last little bit here.
Ah,
I know just reaching you was very difficult, and you were in the throes of submitting information and needing to be on call. How are you doing? Taking some air from that experience, and where are we at with Loop right now?
yeah, it's a super interesting time, and getting to see what's going on at the agency right now during the pandemic has been this whole other level of learning for us. So we submitted the 510K, which for your listeners who don't know what that or what that means, the FDA has different types of applications. A 510K is for a class 2 device, a PMA or pre-market applications for a class 3 device, and they're basically different risk stratifications. So we submitted December 17th is the day specifically, but who's counting? We're counting. And the reason we're counting is because in normal times, a 510K submission takes 90 days to review. And typically there's this period between day 1 and day 60 where there's a lot of interactive conversations going back and forth. And then they let you know on day 60 if they're going to give you a hold or make a request for additional information. Prior to our submission, we had been in touch with the agency just to say, hey, we're getting really close. Just want to make sure it's still cool. Do you want us to wait? Do you want us to submit now? And they were very clear with us. They're like, this is the craziest time we have ever had. I actually talked with at the time, the division chief. The FDA split into two parts, one that handles drugs and biologics called CBER. They're the ones that approve the vaccines under emergency use authorization. And then there's CDRH, the Center for Digital and Center for Diagnostic and Radiological Health. Sorry, I got to keep my acronyms straight. And they do all the devices like insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors. And we talked to the branch chief for CDRH that oversees diabetes devices. They also oversee COVID tests. And when we talked to them late summer, early fall of last year, they had 900 applications for COVID tests in front of them,
Wow.
and that's not vaccines like the other division handles vaccines.
Yeah.
So, all the at home tests, all the in clinic tests, all the,
Yeah.
at Walgreens Rite Aid tests, like every one of these tests has been submitted and reviewed, and the ones that are getting used get emergency use authorizations. So they were very clear with us. We are absolutely swamped
Yeah.
right now. Thank you for your patience. You're
Mm.
not in all likelihood going to get a 90-day review cycle, which is true. Had we gotten a 90-day review cycle, we would have heard back on March 17th. They did let us know around end of February, we're working on it, and we know they're working on it because they keep asking questions. We've had a very active, interactive review cycle, but we have not yet heard. And so we're kind of in this interesting day to day, week to week mode, knowing full well how busy they are. On top of COVID, we know, lots of diabetes device companies have been very clear. We know Insulet submitted the Omnipod 5. We know Dexcom has products under review. We know Medtronic, like everybody, Bigfoot announced that they had submitted their product. So they are just freaking busy. And so we're very thankful that they've even been looking at our application and asking great questions, but we haven't yet heard back. That's where
Got
we're
it.
at.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Everybody's pretty excited. When can I go to the App Store and download the Tidepool Loop app? I can't wait. So when it comes, we'll announce it from the rafters and yell loudly for sure. So
Christopher's got a great answer to that he says to the community, which is trust us. When we have any information, we will share it.
Yeah, whenever there's something to share, we will not be shy about yelling it as
Exactly.
far and wide as possible from the digital mountaintop that we operate on. But until there's something to say, there's something to say, which is, admittedly a tough position to be in. Whenever this is a diabetes community that has a "we are not waiting" hashtag that is part of our moniker. Like, we get it. I get it. I have diabetes. I live with this stuff. I understand, but also seeing it from the other side, I am in this privileged position of being part of this process. And there's, trying to navigate the urgency and the essential nature of the technology that's being developed and that is coming down the road. But also there's a due process that is required for that, and trying to, it's not sexy to communicate, oh no, there is this required review period, there is a regulatory process, there are these important steps that have to be communicated out there, and trying to figure out how to balance that. But ultimately, whenever there's something to celebrate, we will not be shy about
Yeah.
celebrating it with everybody.
That's good. Howard, I remember going down to visit the FDA for our app, Engine One, and sitting under the white hot lights and feeling a little bit uncomfortable, squirming in front of the board there. It was pretty intense, but with reasonable expectations that we want everyone to be safe with these products and whatever we're bringing to market. So it's a good thing. We can wait. It's coming. We know
Yeah.
that. So it's all exciting.
Well, can I talk about that just for a second? Because I hear a lot of people complain about the FDA, and I know you're not, but I've heard device makers and I've heard people in the industry go, "Oh, the bureaucracy of it all," and that has not been our experience at all. Like the people we interact with at the agency are really, really smart and really ask good questions, and they have a really important job to do, and I want them to do that job well. Like their job is to protect and promote public health. Like, we don't want apps going out the door that aren't safe, and we don't want vaccines or tests to go out the door that aren't safe and aren't effective. And so I actually have a huge amount of respect for them. Even before the pandemic, I said they have never slowed us down. So now they are a little bit, but it's understandable. Like there's a once in a century thing going on, and so I can understand that they're a little busy, but they are doing their job and they are doing their job well. And I actually think they deserve a ton of credit for how well they do their job and how efficiently and quickly they do their job.
I agree with you. I would echo that. And I would add that they're very proactive in even coming out to a lot of the meetings that we have and, dialoguing with the community. That's rare, in a lot of other, I think, institutions that have to regulate all sorts of things. So, no, I agree with you. So, with the recent FDA submission of the app, I mean, the Tidepool goal, right, is to achieve this interoperability with, our devices. From the Tidepool's inception, that's been the concept. And since I met you and Tidepool, how much further along are we at this point? Because back then things were really locked down, and now they're
That's
open.
right. Yeah, there's been huge progress, and I'll be honest, Cliff, I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish and how we've moved that dialogue forward. When we got started, it was all about just getting the data out of the devices. And at the time in 2013, it was not a given that you, as a person living with diabetes, would have access to the data from your device and be able to see it in whatever form you wanted to see it. And that conversation over the course of 2013 to say 2018 totally changed. And I take great pride in the fact that we made that be a top of mind conversation for the community and for industry. At the time in 2013, there were those long terms of use that you click through and nobody reads. Some of them, so we read them. And some of them actually said, by uploading your data, you give up all right, title, and interest to your data. And we're like, what? No. Like if you step on a bathroom scale, the scale company doesn't get to own your weight. If you take your temperature with a thermometer, the thermometer company doesn't get to own your temperature. Why is it any different with your glucose reading or your how much insulin got put into your body? Like this is your disease, it's your data. So we totally changed that conversation, which I'm super happy about, and did it in a way that was interoperable and worked with every device. I mean, just from a very personal level, the thing I was frustrated about in 2013 is that my daughter was on a Medtronic pump and a Dexcom CGM. And as a parent, I couldn't see her data in one place and her doctors couldn't see her data in one place. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, why can't we do better? And so we went and did it. So then the interoperability conversation kept getting more interesting as closed loop systems started happening. And honestly, what I think broke that conversation open was the do it yourself community. It was the we are not waiting movement. At the time, Ben West was actually a Tidepool employee, but in his spare time, Ben West was reverse engineering Medtronic insulin pumps at first so he could see the data, but then eventually so that you could actually control the pump. That happened at the same time that John Kostick was reverse engineering the Dexcom receiver so that he, at first, so that he could see his son's data. And then you put those two things together, and I'm pointing my fingers together. I know this is an audio podcast, uh, but then you start putting those things together, and then Scott Librand and Dana Lewis were like, wait a minute, if we can control an insulin pump and we can get the data out of a CGM, we can build a closed loop system. And poof, OpenAPS is born. Fast forward a little bit, Loop is born when Nate Raycliffe says, wait a minute, I'd really like to see this on my iPhone. And Pete Schwab says, you know what? I can make a little box that makes it easy to talk to the Medtronic pump from the iPhone. And so that's when the interoperability story really started taking off. And it became clear that it was way better to have components that could talk to each other than these closed proprietary systems because the DIY community was taking that capability and making these incredible systems. Like my daughter was on OpenAPS in 2015. Like that is years ahead of when commercial systems were available and with much better outcomes and much better results. So that then led Helmsley Trust, JDRF to go, wait a minute, there's something to this interoperability thing. JDRF launches the Open Protocol Initiative. Helmsley Trust and JDRF decided us to fund us to do Loop. And then the last missing piece, again, back to our conversation about the FDA, was the FDA was like, yo, industry, you're crushing us, you're killing us, Smalls. Like you're sending these huge, massive systems for us to review. Why can't you just send us components? And so the FDA actually gets a huge amount of credit because they are the ones that went to industry and they came to us and said, hey, here's what we're thinking. Do you think this is the right way to go? And we're like, absolutely, positively. So the FDA says we want these interoperable components to happen in industry. We're going to dangle this big, fat, juicy carrot in front of you if you do this.
Hmm.
We're going to declassify from class 3 to class 2 if you submit interoperable components that meet these specifications. So it just all came together all at the right time.
So interesting. So then the next, I guess, question I have on that is you have these partnerships already with pump companies, Medtronic and Insulet. So how do you reconcile with the pump companies that, already, for instance, have their own closed loop systems in the marketplace? Meaning, like, how do you get them, to buy into the Tidepool Loop app? With, how will they want to join? How does that actually play out?
Well, it's a process. So,
Yeah.
so the conversations, kind of play out over time with these companies, and we've got other companies, other CGM and pump companies that we're talking to that I can't talk about. You mentioned the ones that we've done public deals with, but in all cases, it's a process. And in general, the story is, hey, this is better for the community. The community should have choice. People should be able to choose the form factor of the pump they want, the user experience that they want, and the CGM that they want, in addition to the algorithm. And when all of those things are components that talk to each other, that opens up a whole new world. I often use you, Cliff, as an example. I'll say something like, hey, algorithms are not one size fits all. Like an algorithm for the adult with type 1 is different than the algorithm for the kid with type 1. That's an obvious thing, but there's also different algorithms for the elite athlete with type 1 or different algorithms for the pregnant mom with type 1. And the more you can make these components interoperable, the easier it is to iterate and start improving on the experience and the algorithm and the form factor. When it's all a big vertical proprietary system, the whole system has to change. But if you can iterate on the components, you can make improvements much more easily.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Well, it's great. I mean, it happened actually relatively fast, in my opinion, how you guys behind the scenes were pulling people together. And that was a lot of legwork, as is right now the big legwork with the FDA. So again, just kudos to you guys for all that hard work. Will there be other, you think, CGM manufacturers in play besides Dexcom down the road?
Nothing to announce, but like
Okay,
Chris said earlier, as soon as there is something to announce, you'll definitely hear it.
good.
The
Okay.
thing I would highlight there is, and this actually goes back to I don't remember when we were allowed to hang out together in person, but there was an ADA, I guess it was a 2019 when we announced the Medtronic and Dexcom um, agreements at D Data. Howard had a slide up behind him. It was this dance card that he had, and we had Dexcom and Medtronic and Insulet up there, and we had empty spots there saying, and he said, our dance card is not yet full. And the goal, as mentioned, is full interoperability so that you can, provided, the prerequisites of, we're not going to talk about as far as the healthcare industry, insurance and, access and things like that. But ultimately, the system won't care what CGM is communicating with it and what pump it's communicating with as well. It's going to be receiving CGM data, sending a command to an insulin pump. And I'm going to do this magic hand wave over this audio podcast to say it's just engineering to make them all communicate together effectively. But Tidepool is responsible for putting in that work. You, as the end user, the person with diabetes, you get to choose the devices that work best for you. And the experience ultimately won't change because it's still going to be that same phone screen that you're looking at to see what your blood sugar is, to see how much insulin you have on board, and you go from there.
Right. What would you say, are there any meaningful changes that we're going to see? Maybe you can or cannot touch base on this, but with the current loop system that we see, right? I mean, I think people were wondering, well, is it going to be the same DIY version in the App Store that I'm going to download and I'm going to have the same experience, or does the FDA like going through this process of saying, hey, we can't really have a treat to this target, for instance, for safety reasons?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we get asked that all the time. The version of Loop that will be known as Tidepool Loop will look extremely familiar to users of DIY Loop. It will be very recognizable. We have changed some elements of the user experience in order to accommodate multiple pumps and multiple CGMs. It's actually all out in the open, so anyone who's really interested can go look in our GitHub repository. That's the place where the open source code is kept, and see what the designs look like and see what we're working on. The question of what will the agency allow in terms of configurable target ranges is an open question. And since we're under review, we have made a proposal to them and said, hey, we would like to have configurable target ranges in this way. I can't yet, because we're not yet cleared, say how that's going to go. They are still reviewing it and still looking at the clinical data. We do believe that people should be able to choose their own target ranges, and people should be able to set their settings as they see fit. The job of the agency is to decide, based on the data that we presented, what is considered to be safe and effective. And so we've made a proposal, and we're going to let the conversation play out, and we hope that the community will be happy with where we end up.
Yeah, that's great. Just comparing and contrasting, when I'm helping people with different systems and our advisors, we really like the fact that Loop shows you the basal rate and shows you when you're going negative, and that can be a little harder with other systems, such as Control IQ, where you're looking at it and saying, well, I wonder how much insulin is actually on board, because certain times it's not shown. So my hope, and I guess we'll find out, is that Loop continues to do it that way. But it was interesting, just in reading up, I think, on some of the information on the site, that you guys are definitely saying, hey, the DIY community is probably going to keep going itself too. So for those who are listening, there's lots of different options out there, and you guys continue to just at least make it accessible. And I think that a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines waiting for this approval, and they're really teeing themselves up to get into it. They say, oh, no, I'm going to wait until it's approved, get that rubber stamp from the FDA and make it happen, so it's exciting where it's headed.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing that needs to be recognized. Actually, two things that needs to be recognized. One is the DIY community will never go away. But, and the agency said this to us, there should be options for people who don't want to build their own system. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put something in the App Store that is FDA reviewed and FDA cleared, so that people who don't want to build their own system can have a choice. And the people who want to keep building their own system, they should also be able to do that. And that will never go away. There will always be people who are tinkerers and citizen scientists. And I am one of those people that will always want to say what is out there and what is the best possible care. Cliff, you're raising your hand too. So that's great. And that will always be the case. But I think there's a whole lot of people who are like, the only reason I'm building it myself and I'm going to all this trouble is because it is the experience I want and it is the best possible care for me or for my child. I would much rather download it from the App Store and just use something that is supported and FDA reviewed and cleared.
Yeah, exactly. And right now, right, the total number of people who are using these systems is still quite small. Even if, in the future, mostly everybody, I think, will be using these, right? But right now, we're still only have, maybe it's like 10,000 users in the Loop group, for instance. But you've got a large addressable market. But how do you grow the access and the affordability for these systems? That's really the question.
Yeah, well, a key to that is making it easy to access. So being in the App Store is certainly one part of that. It's such a we could probably spend an entire podcast talking about accessibility, and it's something that Christopher and I and other folks at Tidepool talk about and work on a lot. And it's something that's really important to us to make sure that the work we do as a nonprofit with a mission of helping the entire community to make sure that the work we do is out there as broadly as possible. It's not just on us. There's definitely things we can do to make sure our app is accessible. It's also on insurance companies to provide insurance for devices and make it easy for people to get those devices. It's on device makers to make sure, to the extent possible, that their devices are covered under public assistance insurance, to make sure that they're available under prescription benefit. It is a big, hairy, complicated problem. We play one small piece of it, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that our technology is broadly accessible. But this is a big problem that just to be blunt, it is very broken in our country, and there's a lot of work that needs to happen to make sure that the best possible care makes it to the most possible people.
To
Makes
yes, and that the thing that I have always appreciated working at Type, I'm saying this also, like my boss is on the recording too, but like we do, where possible, focus on not recreating the wheel. So when it comes to building software, Typepool is an open source company. If there's a tool or a repository out there that is doing a specific thing that we don't have to necessarily build from scratch, then we'll pull that in, put it through our review and and quality management process to make sure that it's actually going to do the thing that it needs to do. But if there's code out there that already does a component that will support our software, we'll bring that in when it comes to data visualization or something like that. Similarly, for this massive landscape of making a closed loop system accessible to as many people as possible, it's Tidepool's responsibility to understand that landscape, but then be hyper focused on the thing that we as a software company can execute on and excel on, and where we can make our voice known, and be participatory in those conversations around bigger things like affordability of insulin and other things like that, other big pieces of the bigger picture of the landscape that is not necessarily Tidepool's focus, but where Tidepool can lend its voice and enthusiasm to. That's where we will go. But our guiding principle, is most often than not, we we do software really, really well. We have to stay laser focused on that. We deliver on this, and we trust that we can support where necessary other groups that are better suited for, public advocacy efforts, the sort of regulatory things that are a little bit out of the realm of Tidepool, even if it is Tidepool adjacent. And that's sort of it's a tough thing to swallow at the end of the day, because as a person with diabetes, I need all of this stuff out there. I want all of my peers in the community to have all this stuff. But as a Tidepool employee, this is where we can make the biggest impact. So we have to stay focused on that.
Makes sense. I guess the question that makes me think about a little bit next is on the research side of things, right? You guys have this really interesting data set that you keep accumulating, and you can learn about, and you can iterate on, and bring on even future enhancements to the system. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so this is another thing that I'm really proud of that we did back in 2016, I think it was, might have been 2017. We launched the Tidepool Big Data Donation Program, and this was in response to both people with diabetes saying to us, "Hey, I'm uploading all this data and it's just sitting there. I can see it and my doctor can see it, but it's not doing any good for anyone. Is there any way we can get it to people where it can do some good?" And we started having researchers saying to us, "Hey, you've got all this really interesting data. Can we get access to it?" So we were in a really interesting position as a trusted not-for-profit to say to the community, "Here's the deal. You own your own data. We will never ever give the data to anyone without your permission. If you would like to, you can check this box and opt in to the Tidepool Big Data Donation Project. We will strip the data of all identifying information, and then we will then allow researchers and industry to take advantage of that data to do good, to expand the boundaries of knowledge and help the diabetes community. And that's been a really successful program. And full transparency, and we said this from day one, we give away the data sets for free to academic researchers and nonprofit institutions, and we charge for-profit institutions. We then take whatever licensing fees we're able to get, and we turn around and we donate 10% of that back to the diabetes nonprofit that people can choose when they opt into the program. So we have given away over $100,000 to JDRF, Beyond Type 1, Diabetes Sisters, Diabetes Hands Foundation, a bunch of others. And we really, really are proud of that program. And it's really making a difference. You can actually go to our website, tidepool.org/big data, and see all of the entities. The ones that are really interesting are the researchers that are working on novel approaches to taking data and providing better therapy. And I'm just really, really proud of us for having the courage to launch that, because it took some courage to do something like that, and really proud of the community for stepping up and donating their data and making it possible.
Yeah, it's a real team effort over there with you guys, and that's what I really like about Tidepool a lot. And yeah, I think that that data is going to make things increasingly better for everyone. And then I guess what do you see the next 5 and 10 years looking like for us? I mean, this is certainly, you've built the frame of the house and the foundation, but what's up at the top?
You're asking a question about what's 5 years from now on a diabetes focused podcast. Like that's like the cardinal sin, but like, there are a lot of
So
mythical things that are
I
available
went there,
5 years
Chris.
from
I
now.
went there.
I have a prop for this question, and your listeners can't see it, but I keep this on my desk. It's my tiny little crystal ball, and when I get this question, I hold it up and say it only sees 6 to 12 months into the future. I'll tell you something that I was really frustrated with when our daughter was diagnosed in 2011. I was really frustrated with there will be a cure in 5 or 10 years, and there will be a closed loop system in 5 years. Like 5 years is the minimum amount of time that people can say where they can't be held accountable for their prediction. And so that's why that always comes up. And so what I like to say is, look, there's lots of really interesting things happening in the future. I am really excited about big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence. I'm really excited about context aware delivery of therapy, where your system says, oh, hey, Cliff, I happen to notice that you always go for a run at 7 a.m. You're doing it again. I'm going to cut your basal rates at 6:30 without you needing to tell me a thing. Like, there's no reason a system can't do that. And there's no reason why a system can't tune your settings for you. There's no reason why a system can't understand your eating patterns, your exercise patterns, your sleep patterns, your menstrual cycles if you menstruate. There's so much extra information that can go into providing better therapy, and there's, for all intents and purposes, in infinite compute power for us to take all that data and deliver better care to people. On top of that, I'm super excited about better user experiences. I think the thing DIY Loop showed us is that having control of your diabetes on your wrist is huge. To be able to bolus for a meal discreetly, just sitting there and go tap, 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 and now I'm eating, is amazing. Imagine being able to leave the house with just your watch and your little patch pump and a sensor and nothing else, no phone. Like, I'm excited about that. I'm excited for faster insulins that are coming. There's some really interesting research and development going on so that there can be liquid monomer insulins. So basically the speed of Afrezza in liquid form. When that is possible, closed loop systems can be way more precise and way more accurate. And you don't have this craziness of, oh God, what's going to happen? The insulin's not going to peak for another 45 to 60 minutes. So start thinking about how interesting systems get when you've got that kind of insulin available in shelf stable liquid form. So I'm excited about a lot of things. I'm
Yeah.
not going to predict what's going to be here in 5 years. I'm focused on the next 6 to 12 months.
Well, I was promised a cure in 1988, so I'm still holding
See?
out, right? But I do think that we proverbially landed on the moon when Loop showed up, and I mean it really was a massive, massive thing that's happened here. The daily grind and the mental driving down the road. It's a lot like we have automation with cars right now and full self-driving. We're still getting there, but it's an impressive leap forward from where we used to be. And to your point about where we're going with insulins, FIASP is something a lot of folks are starting to tinker around with, a little bit faster insulin, and you can see these systems pivoting more quickly. So
Yeah, I totally agree. And to me, that's why, back to the question about interoperability, the rate at which we can innovate and iterate can be done so much quicker in software than it can with hardware devices. So when you can tease apart the systems and iterate quickly on the algorithm and iterate quickly on the user experience, it really changes the ball game. And that might be the thing that I'm most excited about and we've seen it in the DIY community, and we are starting to see it in the commercial industry.
that's cool. On the data side of things, what was some of the most exciting things that you've seen through I mean, I don't know if you could share on it, but in what you look through in the Tidepool apps and data sets, I mean, there's got to be such interesting information in there. I mean, not a lot of people get to see that kind of level of information. I'm curious as a DIY guy myself, what that looks like, or what did you glean from some of that?
Yeah, it is really interesting. So the first thing that is notable, and this won't be a surprise since you're on DIY, a DIY closed loop system, is how much better closed loop systems are than the usual standard of care. So there is no doubt in my mind that closed loop therapy should be the standard of care for everyone. And back to the accessibility question, to the extent that we can play our part to make sure that closed loop systems get out there as quickly and broadly as possible. Like that is far and away the biggest takeaway for me is how much better people do in closed loop systems. It is now standard for, and not just loop, but control IQ, 670G, other systems that are available in Europe. 70% time in range is now like the bottom, and now people are looking at 80% and thinking, what will it take for us to get to 90% time in range? And that's pretty incredible. Like that lets people living with type 1 essentially live a completely euglycemic
Yeah.
life with no complications. That's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot less, thinking and worry. And I think that's the big thing, right? Is if you can keep stripping away the number of times somebody pings in their head, how many times they have to think about
Exactly.
what they're doing for diabetes every day. The biggest release for me personally when I started this system was, hey, I'm thinking a lot less about all the math and the things that I have to do to be in the right space for my blood sugar to be good. So that mental burden is getting eased.
Exactly. And that's probably what we heard from the DIY loop community more than anything is that reduction in burden, being able to go back to live your life, not having to think about all the decisions that you used to have to make using the traditional standard of care. And to me, like as a father of a kid with type 1, like for my daughter to be able to just go live her life and do the things that she's interested in, like that's what it's all about. I just want her to focus on her art and her music and her school and her, all the things that a 21-year-old kid should be doing. And being on a closed loop system lets her do that.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So one of the questions that came in from our community, I would, do you think that we'll still need a Riley link? And if so, when can we get rid of our Riley links?
Yeah, Tidepool Loop will not need the use of any kind of device, Riley Link or Orange Link, in order to talk to the pump and CGM. Tidepool Loop is intended to be used with Bluetooth enabled. They're known as ACE pumps, alternate controller enabled pumps, and ICGMs, integrated continuous glucose monitors. So that is a key value proposition of Tidepool Loop, is that there is no extra device required.
That's really nice. I mean, it keeps getting more and more simple. I love the idea of an Apple Watch and just going out for, my daily walk, run, and that's all I need. That's it. That'd be great. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming on today. If there's any other thoughts you guys want to share, I would love for you to keep doing what you're doing. That's about it. I mean, the DIY community is being well served by you guys, and so are the entire diabetes community here. So I just want to say thank you so much for being on with us.
Really appreciate it, Cliff. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and I really appreciate you having us on.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Cliff. I guess I would say, though, you said there's anything you can do to help. Tidepool is a nonprofit. I'm going to throw it out there, tidepool.org/donate. If, times are still weird, is a global pandemic out there. If you're able to offer some support for us, that would be fantastic. And for anybody out there listening to this, if you don't know what Tidepool actually is, like, you can use Tidepool to view data from your pump, CGM, and meter all in one place. It looks pretty cool, but I'm paid to say that because I work here, but I was using Tidepool before I was working at Tidepool. But yeah, we support over 50 pumps, CGMs, and meters. All that stuff is coming in. Depending on when this podcast is being released, we'll be actually releasing an update to fully support viewing data from Control IQ technology pumps very, very soon, which I'm very excited as a Control IQ user myself. So yeah, in terms of sort of the original genesis of Tidepool, pre-loop fun. The data access and visualization was and continues to be a key part of how we operate. It's key for parents, for people with diabetes, for clinicians. We've seen over the past year as telemedicine has become a necessity, that Tidepool has been a tremendous asset and resource for clinicians across the country as they've been trying to grapple with, I can't see my patient in person. What do I do to view this diabetes device data, which is essential to me doing my job? So, the adventure continues in a number of different facets. Loop is obviously a very big deal for a really good reason, but the rest of the sort of Tidepool process carries on and continues to thrive. And it's been, again, I work here, I'm biased, but it's been really exciting to be part of this movement.
So let me pile on because Christopher has done an incredible job. So if we set Loop aside for a second, the pandemic caused something else to become front of mind, which is when you can't actually go into clinic and see your endocrinologist, you need a way to upload and view your data and a way so that your doctor can see your data. And so we wouldn't have planned it this way. We obviously would rather the pandemic didn't happen, but we saw huge growth in both clinics and people living with diabetes when the pandemic started. And we didn't plan it that way, but it turns out that that part of what Tidepool does ended up being really, really useful. And Christopher, as our clinic success manager, was working round the clock to make sure clinics were getting up and running when things got really crazy.
Lots and lots of emails.
Yeah, I bet. It fit in great for telemedicine and continues to be something that you guys are going to leverage in the future. And I will say also for our listeners too, you can make a donation on Tidepool's site and you can get some pretty cool swag and gear on their t-shirts, sweatshirts, so you can wear the cause and make a donation there. So thanks again, guys, for coming on, and keep doing all the great work you're doing over there.
Really appreciate it, Cliff. Thanks so
Thanks,
much for
Cliff.
having us on.
Thanks for listening to the Glucose Advisors podcast. For more episodes, visit our community at glucoseadvisors.com. Learn from our team of advisors and find out more about space available in our programs. Head on over to Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you find your podcast to rate, subscribe, or leave a review. Until next time, take control, stay inspired, and live a better life with T1D.